light of this Easter story, this last Easter story, this is my hope for us, my prayer today. That we will rediscover that the greatest joy of all is not in seeking, but in being sought. Not in knowing, but in being known. Not in finding, but in being found. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." We're a lot more like the disciples 3 weeks after Easter, wondering, okay, Jesus is risen, but how do we live in light of this? What does this mean for us as we return to the ordinary activities of our lives? And that's precisely what the disciples are doing. They return to what they know, to what's comfortable, to what's familiar to them. They go back to fishing because they're fishermen. Because you see, they live in the same space that you and I do. They believe that Christ is risen. They've seen him. But they also know that they can't live off the fumes of Easter Sunday forever. Again, the excitement wanes, the luster fades so fast. They have to consider how this new reality will transform their ordinary lives, their ordinary rhythms and routines. Simply put, Peter puts up a gone fishing sign. He says, I'm checking out. I'm not going to be here for a little bit. I need a break. And he does that because fishing for him represents the old way that he lived before Jesus, but it also represents, I think, his escape from the pressures of life. Fishing is his way of relaxing after all that he's been through. And if you think about it, isn't that what we all did on Easter Sunday? After receiving that Easter message for the first time, we returned to our rhythms. We returned to our relaxations. We went to lunch right after church. We took a nap, perhaps. We watched TV. We caught up with family. But hopefully we did it with a renewed sense that the risen Christ accompanied us in those things. And I think that's what's happening here. Peter goes fishing because he's been overwhelmed by the recent events. You know the story. Some of you walked with us through that story in Holy Week, Palm Sunday, the cleansing of the temple, the Passover meal, what we call communion, sitting in Gethsemane with Jesus, his betrayal, Jesus' crucifixion, Peter's failure to stay true to Jesus. Peter's been through all of this. And the human spirit can only take so much before we need a break. We need a breather. We can't handle that breakneck pace constantly without stopping and slowing down and pausing. We all need some kind of way to check out from reality when we get overwhelmed by the emotional roller coaster that is life. For some of us, this relief comes in the form of chocolate or wine or beer perhaps, or even whiskey if that's your thing. For some, it's shopping or binging TV or reading. Whatever it is, I hope that you all have some kind of comforting activity that you can retreat to when times get rough, that you can turn to keep life from overwhelming you. I hope you have a way to put up a sign and go fishing like Peter. For me, it's rock climbing. And I'm hopefully just a few weeks away from being able to do that again, because that's my way of unwinding. That's my way of being relieved from the pressures of the world. Unfortunately, the disciples' stress reliever isn't working, though. They go fishing, but we're told they don't catch anything. At least not until a stranger shows up on the shore telling them to try the other side. We're told they don't recognize him initially, at least it doesn't look like they do, but they do what he says anyway. And that's when they catch that huge load of fish, a miracle catch made possible by Jesus, which causes the disciple whom Jesus loved, we're not told who that is. Most scholars think that's John. I'm going to assume it's John. The disciple whom Jesus loved recognizes Jesus after this miracle. And then Peter recognizes Jesus after the beloved disciple does. And Peter jumps in and swims to shore where that beautiful breakfast is waiting for him. Where the Jesus who turned water into wine in John 2, where the Jesus who made a small lunch into a feast in John chapter 6 for the 5,000, the Jesus who turned a fishless night into the greatest catch, again provides a meal for his disciples, where there's plenty of fish and plenty of bread for everyone. I see here Jesus coming to his disciples in the most ordinary of things, a fishing break, a simple meal, and putting his stamp of approval on the mundane, ordinary, beautiful things of life. Jesus is blessing their need for a break. He gets what they've been through. He gets that they need to step back. He also uses this opportunity to give them a final word. And the final word from the risen Jesus is not what I think we tend to expect it to be. Jesus doesn't say, "Come and pray with me." He doesn't say, "Come and change the world with me." He doesn't say, "Come and fight for justice with me." He says, again, one of my favorite phrases, "Come and have breakfast." That's the final invitation of the risen Lord. Let's have a meal together. Let me feed you. Let me nourish you. And as I said with the kids in this, I think we hear echoes of this table, of this meal, what we call communion, where Jesus similarly welcomes us, feeds us, strengthens us, and then sends us into the world. Jesus affirms their retreat from the stress and chaos of life by meeting them in this ordinary space through these ordinary, simple, and yet beautiful, sacred things. Because after Easter is over, it's important to remember that even ordinary things can be altars where the risen Christ surprises us with his presence. He continues to meet with us in meals, in fishing, in breaks and stress relievers, in the well-timed touch of a friend, in the voice of a child, in epiphany while you're binge watching a show or rock climbing or fishing or whatever it is you do. In all of these things, Jesus shows up and says, "I'm here for you. Let me take care of you. I've got you." One of the wisest things I ever heard was from my mentor, Rich Vincent. He says, sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is take a nap. Sometimes the most sacred thing that you could do in a given moment is to just lay down and allow the Lord to hold you and carry you. He goes on to say that sleep is for the body, but a nap is for the soul. And of course, he didn't come up with that. But I think that's true. It shouldn't surprise us that Christ is always in the ordinary, often unseen, like the disciples don't see Jesus or recognize him right away. Life can be overwhelming. Sometimes we have to go fishing. We need to escape. We need to retreat from the stress of life. But thank God we can never escape the risen Christ. Thank God that he always goes before us. Thank God the Last Supper that Jesus gave his disciples the night before he died, the supper we're going to celebrate here in a bit, is never the Last Supper. For Christ is always ready to beckon us anew, come and have breakfast, to remind us again that he is still for us, that he is still with us, he is still in us. How wonderful, I think, that this table is always here. Even if we're not celebrating communion, it's always here. And so is whatever you do to escape and retreat and recover from the stresses of life, whether it's fishing or rock climbing. Those things are always there for you, and they're good, and we should use them and thank God for them. Because in all of these places, the risen Jesus is already there, ready to serve us, to nourish us. As we move into the future, we can relax, knowing that we can never go from his presence, for he accompanies us in all we do. So that's our story. Jesus sent the disciples. Remember in John 20, that's his thing. Go, as the Father sent me, so I send you. He sends them, but they go back to their boats instead, and yet Jesus chases after them. He goes after them. He looks for them. There's nothing new about this. This is the story of Scripture from the very beginning. The persistent, pursuing presence and love of God that never, ever gives up. It goes all the way back to the creation account in Genesis. We're told that after God creates the world, he puts human beings in it to steward it, to take care of it, to be the gardeners that cultivate it. He goes out to fellowship with his image bearers, but Adam and Eve are hiding, right? Because they've sinned. And God doesn't scold them. God doesn't reject them. He asks, where are you? Why are you hiding? And this begins one of the greatest search stories of all time. It's the story of the Bible. The Old Testament speaks of it. The Spirit speaks through the poets and preachers telling us of a God who's always on the road looking for us. The New Testament picks up on that. In the fullness of time, the Word becomes flesh, showing us how far God is willing to go in his reckless pursuit to be with humanity. That's how far God is willing to go. Betrayal, torture, shameful death. Here's my body. Here's my blood. What else can I give? That's how far God is willing to go in order to be with us. After rising from the dead, this is still true of Jesus. He is still seeking us on the Easter road. I heard a story a few years back about a 25-year-old gentleman in London, England in the 19th century. His life wasn't going very well. He was starving. His life didn't start bad. It actually started with promise. His dad was a doctor, and so he thought, well, I'll be a doctor too. So he takes the medical exam, and he fails the medical exam 3 times, which makes him feel like a failure. So when he's in his mid-20s, he basically gives up. He lives on the streets of London. He sells these matchboxes to survive. And in the midst of all that, he develops an opium habit, spending most of his time in the opium dens of the London underground. Eventually, he's kicked out of the museum reading room that his father pays for. He has a place there, but he's so emaciated, he's so unkempt that they won't let him in. He's hit rock bottom, and he soon finds himself unconscious on the ground, where a prostitute finds him. This prostitute gets somebody's help, and they get him back to her apartment, and she searches his pockets, and she's looking for identification, but instead she finds these little folded papers, these green papers instead. And on one side, it's clear that he's licked the paper. He's trying to sustain himself. That's how hungry he is. But on the other side are the words of a poem. these words. I fled him down the nights and down the days. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinthine ways of my own mind, and in the midst of tears, I hid from him. Up Vista's hopes I sped and shot precipitated, adown titanic glooms of chasmed fears, from those strong feet that followed after. It's a true story. The young man was Francis Thompson. The poem is The Hound of Heaven. Who's the Hound of Heaven? We know who it is. It's the risen Jesus on the road, forever looking for us. My mentor, when he talks about the Hound of Heaven in his sermons, he actually does the bellowing hound dog noise, the ooh, which I can't really do. That's more like a werewolf. But you get this idea, this image of a hunting dog bellowing, chasing us down relentlessly, mercilessly, refusing to give up. And this is the picture of God that we're given in the scriptures, in Jesus. In the Old Testament, the psalmist has already told us this. We've heard these before. Psalm 23, the very end. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Psalm 139, it says, go to the ends of the earth. Go ahead. He'll come looking for you there. Make your home in Sheol. Shack up with death. See what happens. He'll come looking for you there too. Go fishing. He'll look for you. The risen Jesus has always been doing this. And he keeps coming to us like he kept coming to the disciples. And as I draw this to a close, wherever you are on your journey today, wherever you are on this Easter road we're all on, there is joy to be had. And the joy to be had is the joy of being found. As a foster parent, almost all of my kids were really little. Some of you know in my previous season, I took care of children for the state of Ohio, the city of Toledo. And most of my kids were infant, tiny, like none of, I think the oldest kid, except for the one I'm about to share with you, was 1.5 years old. But my oldest, a 4-year-old named Nate, could do things that none of my other kids could do. And one of the things that he could do is play hide and seek. He never wanted to be the seeker, though. He always wanted to be the hider. And the thing was, that was the thing he was most terrible at. He was bad at both hiding and seeking, but he was worse at hiding, and yet that was what he wanted to do. So that's what we did. And he picked the same spot every time to hide. That was why he was so bad. He didn't get the concept of, I'm going to know you're there if you do it again. But he always hid in his bedroom. And he always hid right behind the bedroom door, kind of creeping into that little nook there. And without fail, every time, before I even finished counting, 8, 9, 10, before I got the 10 out, I would hear him squealing and laughing behind the door. And he would start tapping his feet excitedly and shaking against the door, rattling the door. And as soon as I looked up, ready or not, here I come, he would go around the door and peek his giggling head out from behind the door to see me. And I went along with it. After pretending to look somewhere else for a while, I would make these big steps to his room so he could hear me getting closer and closer. And then I would throw open his door and I'd go, aha! And I'd pick him up and I would go into the living room and throw him on the couch and take pillows and start hitting him, to both of our great delight. Don't worry, he loved it. There wasn't much serious hiding or seeking involved in this game of hide and seek. And yet I've never seen someone have so much fun in their whole life. You know why? Because Nate discovered the real joy of hide and seek. He discovered that the real joy of hide and seek was the joy of being found. Friends, it's still Easter. We got a couple more weeks left of this. So in light of this Easter story, this last Easter story, this is my hope for us, my prayer today. That we will rediscover that the greatest joy of all is not in seeking, but in being sought. Not in knowing, but in being known. Not in finding, but in being found.